Is Tokyo Jungle a cult classic, or a game that time will eventually forget? I'm Joe, an ex-gaming industry pro, and today we're taking a wild trip to the future and reviewing Tokyo Jungle. Developed by Crispies and published by Sony in 2012, Tokyo Jungle drops you into a world where humans have mysteriously disappeared, leaving animals to take over a decaying Tokyo. You play as everything from Pomeranians to lions, and even some of the more bizarre inclusions, which we'll get into later. Now, you might not have heard of this game. It started off as a Japan-only release and later came to the rest of the world via PSN. But was it any good? Well, at its core, Tokyo Jungle is a survival game with roguelike elements. You pick an animal, either herbivore or carnivore, and your main goal is survival. This means hunting, foraging, marking territory, and producing offspring to keep your bloodline going. Each species plays differently, and with over 40 animals, that gives you a ton of variety in how you approach the game. The game's story is mostly in the background, told through archives scattered across the world. These slowly unravel the mystery behind humanity's disappearance, leading to a wild twist. There's also a story mode that follows specific animals and reveals more about the world's fate. The first thing that hit me was how brutal this game is. Animals get massacred by each other in savage combat, and the ominous main menu music, it sets the tone right away. It's like something out of Donnie Darko. Now, let's dive into the gameplay. You've got two modes: story mode, which I touched on earlier, and survival mode, which is where the game really shines. It's a roguelike experience where you pick an animal and try to survive as long as possible, competing on a global leaderboard. You'll spend most of your time hunting, foraging for food, marking your territory, and mating to continue your bloodline. If you don't mate, it's game over. Your legacy ends, and you have to start over. Wait, are we still talking about the game? But this game is more than just survival. It's a balancing act. Smaller animals have to run from predators while bigger ones rule the food chain. And don't get me started on how hard it is when you play as a herbivore. Larger animals can one-shot you without warning. The worst offender for this brutal gameplay? Playing as the chick. It reminded me of my traumatic experience with Raging Blast 2, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that video yet, it's probably my best work so far. So make sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up with all the chaos. But don't worry, the prey does eventually get its chance to fight back, and in some pretty hilarious ways too. The roguelike nature of survival mode keeps things fresh. You're constantly trying to stay alive while the world becomes more dangerous as time passes. Tigers, bears, and even crocodiles start showing up, and you can't afford to take them lightly. But even for the tigers, bears, and crocodiles, survival is never guaranteed. You've got hunger, aging, and a dangerous environment that constantly tries to end your bloodline. There's a certain melancholy to the idea that every animal story will eventually end. But to keep things light, let's talk about the outfits. You can dress your animals up in ridiculous costumes for stat boosts, like a cat wearing an antenna on its head. It adds a bit of humour to an otherwise brutal world. Oh, and the way they describe potential mates? It's a blow to the ego for sure. One thing that might frustrate you is that most, if not all, the game's challenges are time-based. If you don't complete them fast enough, they fail, and when you've spent half your time just trekking across the map, it can be a little punishing. Also, let's talk about the combat. On paper, it sounds like Dark Souls. You evade attacks and then counter, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, but the execution is a bit clunky. It's unbalanced, and honestly, you'll want to avoid combat where possible. But here's what keeps you coming back for more: 40 plus animals to unlock and play with, including some really bizarre ones. Well, I hinted at it earlier, but the roster includes prehistoric animals and robots. More specifically, Aibos. You know, Sony's robotic dogs designed with lifelike expressions and a dynamic array of movements. Aibos' lovable behaviour brings warmth and delight to the everyday lives of its owners.
Hello.
Hey man, no, this video is not sponsored, right? I don't even know if Aibo still exist.
Oh, which gives a hint that something is off here. And yes, each animal plays differently. The replayability here is excellent. There's even a co-op mode where you can both pick different animals and go out into the wild together. I had no one to play this with. But from what I've read, things get twice as hard. You need more food, more nests, and it's harder to sneak around. But this just adds to my earlier point about the replayability being excellent. Now, what's not so excellent? The visuals. Honestly, the game looks like a DS game upscaled for the PS3. The animals can look stiff, and it's not the most detailed world. But since this wasn't a AAA title, the graphics didn't bother me too much, and they unintentionally give a hint of nostalgia. The sound design is also not the greatest. You've got generic rave tracks in the background that sometimes overlap with each other. And it gets really annoying. But the animal sounds and the eerie feeling of an overgrown Tokyo at night, that part works really well. Now, the story is kind of bleak. Without spoiling too much, it involves a take on time travel that I've not personally seen before. It explains the prehistoric animals and the robots, because those 100% needed explaining.
No, you can't just have them in the game for fun. It needs an explanation.
What's the lore reason behind this?
And the ending? It's a moral choice about the fate of humans and the environment. Bit heavy, innit? But there's only one true ending, and it's a sad one, staying in line with the game's overall melancholy tone. So, is Tokyo Jungle a cult classic, or will it be left behind? If you're into weird, quirky games with a unique concept, you'll love it. The replayability is solid thanks to the huge roster of animals, and the survival mechanics are addictive. But the dated graphics, unbalanced combat, and time-based challenges might frustrate you. Still, I'd recommend giving it a go. It's one of the most original PS3 games out there. Just don't pick the chick unless you're ready for a world of hurt. Most of you will have clicked off by now, and that's completely okay. But I just wanted to say, when this video drops, it's almost my birthday. Thank you so much for all the support. I've loved reading every one of your comments, and I can't wait to see what the next year of my life will bring. Hopefully no more flops, but you know, you live and you learn. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more wild games, hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever and wherever you are. See you next week for some friendly neighborhood action.